Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Zest Web, your tool for a contactless check-in, check-out experience, presented by StayNTouch implementation consultant, Chris Devlin. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at StayNTouch. Today's presentation will cover how you can get the most out of Zest Web. In this webinar, we will demonstrate how to configure Zest Web for check-ins and check-outs, learn how to integrate with mobile keys to allow for contactless check-in, and illustrate how to include add-ons and upsells to generate incremental revenue. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Chris, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thanks everyone for joining.
1 second. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. And we're going to begin by looking at the Zest check-in settings, and then we're going to look at our Zest checkout settings. So that's the two main things that we're going to be focusing on for today. And most of this is done in the back end of the system. So we're going to start by navigating to our settings and our settings. And Zest is the third option down on the left-hand side. So we're looking for Zest here. Now, there's a lot of different options on the screen, as you'll see, but luckily we don't have to focus on too many of them. We're really primarily focusing on check-in, check-out, direct URL, which I'll talk about, our countries list, our room-ready email, add-ons, and dynamic templates. But first, we're going to dive into our check-in area here. We're going to review the settings that we have here, and we will make some tweaks to them. And I have some videos that will show you the different outcomes of these different changes that we're going to make. The first thing that I'll point out, though, is this send email check-in alert. Now, this is the main toggle that activates the functionality for us. So with this enabled, this will actually be sending the emails to the customers. So this is your on and off switch, basically, that actually activates this. Now, in order for the emails to go out, we do have to have some times defined on the right-hand side here. And you'll see that there's a send email to guests on day before arrival, in addition to send email to guests on day of arrival. So you have some options here. You don't need to use both. If you want to only send a guest an email on the day of arrival, you can choose that, or the day before. That's entirely up to you. If you do send a guest an email on the day before arrival and they engage with that email, and they go through the pre-arrival process and they check themselves in, the system will know that they've done that, and it will not then send them a second email. So once they've pre-checked in, it won't bombard them with a second email. It will just send it to them once they've completed that check-in. It will know that that's been done and they'll be good to go. So many of our hotels, for example, will send them an email 24 hours prior to arrival, much like what the airlines will do. And if they haven't engaged, it will send it to them again. One point of note about this screen, there are many different types of aspects that we have to consider. We, for example, have some customers that we have developed apps for. So you'll see references to apps through many of the different screen areas. We also work in overlay environments. Those are things that we don't need to worry about during this call. This call is primarily for our standalone customers. So I'm going to skip over most of those screens intentionally. So as I do that, just disregard those. Those are things that we can just basically ignore for the most part. Now, if you want your property to have the system be able to assign a room, authorize a credit card, and check the guest into the room automatically, and then send the guest an email letting them know that their room is ready, what you want to have set up is pre-check-in only and auto check-in selected. So with send email check-in alert, pre-check-in only, and auto check-in selected, you are pretty much good to go. I have only if reservation is credit card guaranteed selected here. And what that's doing is limiting my emails to only those guests that we have a credit card on file for. And that's a bit of a safety net so that we know that we're not sending these to guests that have cash on file. Now, in some circumstances, we can ask guests to always collect or always input a credit card during the flow, but that does only work with our merchant linked Shift4 integration as an option. So that's something to bear in mind, and we'll see that as we move further down the screen in just a moment. So let's actually move a little further down the screen. The next section is our confirmation. Control what appears when the guest completes the opt-in for automatic check-in. So this is the final screen once they've actually completed their check-in. And we're saying thank you for checking in. If you have any questions or concerns regarding your stay, please contact us at the hotel. Free-form text, you can write whatever you would like here. And again, this is the final part of the screen that they'll see once they've completed their pre-check-in, and you'll see that in the video momentarily. We have some call to actions for apps here, so we're going to ignore that because we're not doing anything with our apps. But this next section is very important. X minutes prior to arrival time, start auto check-in between these times. So what we're telling the system to do here is, however many minutes we define here, and in this case we're saying 120, we want to tell the system at this point, start assigning a room, authorizing the card, checking the guest in, and then emailing the guest if their room is ready. So depending upon your property, you can say perhaps an hour before the time that the guest has indicated that they're arriving, we can start the process, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, up to 300 minutes. So if I've indicated that I'm arriving at 2 p.m., in this case, it would be 2 hours before 2 p.m. that we have the system initiating this process. So that's the time that the system will start looking for a room that's clean or inspected based on your system properties to begin that process. What time do we want to start allowing auto check-in? And what time do we want to stop auto check-in? You can determine that here. For those properties that want to allow it 24/7, you can basically just start from midnight to 11:45 p.m. You have that flexibility to really make that window as wide as you would want. Where you see the send non-CC reservations to front desk only, again, that's for our overlay properties only, so you can disregard that here. There's a very important toggle here, limit arrival times based on hotel's local time. I've left that switched off on purpose for the moment, and you'll see why when we see some of these videos and why that's important to have switched on. So we're gonna just scroll past that at the moment. And we can also limit the number of web check-ins per day. I think in the current environment, that's probably not something that people would be too interested in doing, but it is an option for you if you want to. We have it limited to 500, but you can leave that blank. There's no need for you to do that if you don't want to, but you certainly can. Pre-check-in email fields. So this is your pre-check-in email title, the subject of your email that the guest will receive. So Wexford Bay Hotel welcomes you. We have a pre-check-in top portion and bottom portion. So free-form text, you can put in whatever you would like here. You'll have the top portion, you'll have the link to check in, and then you'll have the pre-check-in bottom portion. So you can put in whatever you would like there, and you'll see how that looks on the video for how that actually appears on the email itself. We can exclude certain guests from receiving the email based on conditions like rate codes, particular block codes, particular groups, and particular room types. If that's of interest to you, you just simply go into here, search for and select the particular, let's say, rate code, and then exclude that rate code from getting the invitations. And then the logic will be invoked so that that doesn't get included anymore. A little further down, and we're going to see this in action shortly, we can do things like ask for guests' address details so that they can update their address details if they want to, and if we don't have it, we can collect it. We can ask for things like birth dates, and we can make that mandatory if that's a requirement in your jurisdiction. Collect address details. We have prompt for guests CC active currently, so we're asking the guest to add a credit card even if one exists on the reservation currently. And I just wanted to show how that works. This does currently only work for our Merchant Link Shift4 integration, which we're using in North America. So that's something to bear in mind. This does only work with Merchant Link Shift4. So if you're using 3C, this is not an option for you right now. Something to bear in mind there. Check-in now or later call to action. That's for specific templates. So most of you won't need to worry about that. This is a very useful feature, web check-in staff alert. So if you want to be notified when a guest does use the web check-in, this is a great feature, toggle this on, and you can be notified to any email address or distribution list for all or only when it's not successful. So let's say that the authorization failed or that there was a problem in assigning a room for whatever reason, you can have email addresses listed in here and they can get that notification when a guest has checked in using the web check-in feature. We also have the URL check-in, which is a great feature. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail momentarily, but this is where guests can actually check in via a URL as opposed to using the email. And in doing so, we can ask them how to verify their reservation information, if it's by confirmation number only, or they can choose between confirmation number and departure date. And I'll show you how we can set that up in just a moment. Towards the bottom of the screen, much of this is actually template specific. I'm going to talk about templates in just a moment. room key communications require 0 outstanding total stays, and the survey and number of keys, most of that you can disregard. There is an enforced deposit option. So if you have deposit policies on your reservations, you can enforce the deposit during the check-in flow, and that will just simply prompt the guest to pay that deposit prior to checking in. If you don't have this switched on, however, and a guest does have an outstanding deposit, bear in mind that the system will just simply authorize for that deposit amount in addition to any room and tax and incidentals that are required during the check-in. So you won't necessarily miss that money. The authorization rule will just include it in the amount that's outstanding. So not something that's necessary for you to switch on, it just invokes an additional screen. So you don't have to have that switched on if you don't want to. Address country list, enforce country sort order. This is something that we like to have switched on when you are using address collection. It just makes it a little bit easier for some of the customers when we have it switched on. If I go back to my Zest screen here and into my countries list, what we can do is we can add some countries basically to the top of our sort list. And we're familiar with this from, adding our address to online applications and such. So I can go in here and I can choose a country like, let's just say Argentina, save changes. And now Argentina will be at the top of the list when we're scrolling and adding to our address. So talking about our check-in, for the most part, that's everything that we need to have set up for our first video, but I do want to talk about our room ready email. So I'm going to go back to our list here, and let's take a look at our room ready email. This is the email that the guests will get once the room is actually successfully checked in. Your room is ready. Thank you for your patience. We're happy to announce that your room is ready. This says, please go to the express desk to pick up your key. Now, in the current environment, we would probably want to change that and perhaps say something like, you'll shortly receive a notification from OpenKey or from Keeper or from Zaplocks or from one of our integrations, depending upon what you have set up. Freeform text, it can be whatever you would like it to be. So that's what you can fill in there, and that's what the guest will receive once the room has actually been checked in. Now, it is important to note that we also have, in some properties, dynamic email templates, which is a little bit different from the standard setup that you've seen. And in dynamic email templates, what this is doing is just giving you a little bit more flexibility with the look and feel of your emails. So you'll know if you have this active for your property by simply going in here and clicking into something like general email settings. And in this case, it says this feature is not activated. For activation and more information, please contact StayNTouch Help Desk. So it's not activated for here, but if it is activated for your property, what it does is it allows you to do things like choose background color, text color, button color, more flexibility for how your emails look and feel, and you can preview. So in this case, we have some gray background, just a little bit more flexibility. And if it is active, you have the options for your pre-check-in email, so you can change the text here instead. Pre-check-in email are emails that will go out prior to arrival time. Check-in email is an email that would go out when the room is ready, so after arrival time when the room is ready. And then you have your checkout email, so very similar to what we have in the other screens that you've seen, just a different area of setting up those emails, and you can preview them here. But again, if active for your property, if not active, something that we can set up for you, and you can request that in the StayNTouch Help Desk area here. Templates in general, as you see the videos that I'm going to show you, we're using the StayNTouch template. Each property generally has its own template with the logo of the property, the look and feel of the property based on things like the website design that you may have. So it would be a pretty seamless experience for the customer. It would look like not different from them engaging with your particular website, let's say. So it should seem like they're engaging with your website based on your design aspects and so on and so forth. Another couple of considerations before we actually look at the videos, you would want to have under your hotel and staff and stationery, under terms and conditions, it is important that under Zest Web Check-In, you do have some form of terms and conditions invoked here because that will pop up during the check-in flow. So it's important that you have that active here so that the guest can see some kind of terms and conditions there. It might be things like your smoking policy, if you have a pet policy, anything like that. So you can create a specific one for Zest Web if you want to, or you can just invoke general terms and conditions that you have already for the property and just pull that in there. Now, we also, as you'll see in the videos, have add-ons, which are the packages being displayed. Now, how to have those pulled in as part of the flow. Your add-ons, if you have them in your property, are going to be created under rates and add-ons, but we actually have them invoked under Zest and add-ons. And you'll see a list of all the ones that are available to you. And if you want to include them as an option, you just simply need to click offer, toggle the offer button on, and then it becomes available. As a point of note, only add-ons that are configured as reservation only would be an option for you to toggle on. So if you have an add-on that is configured as rate only, it's not going to be an option for you. So that's just something that's important to note. If it's reservation only, then it's there and you can just simply toggle it on and it will be part of the flow for you. So fairly simple for you to make that part of the flow. Should be listed for you here. Toggle it as offer, and then it's going to be part of the flow automatically for you. So with our check-in settings as they are, let's take a look at our first video, which will show you how this actually looks for the guest. So I've got a video lined up here. So we have the email that's come in for the Wexford Bay Hotel, that first email on the list here. I've clicked on it. I'm clicking on my pre-check-in now. And it's going to bring me to, it's going to open it up in Chrome in this case, and it's bringing me to zest.StayNTouch.com. I'm going to confirm my departure date, and I'm going to enter the last 4 digits of the credit card that I have on file for the reservation. Now, in the link is actually an embedded token, so it does know that we have the right reservation, but this is really just confirming the reservation details, much like you would do if you were checking in at the front desk. Do we have the right guest? That's really the purpose of this. We have our stay details, confirming that everything is correct there, arrival and departure. I've clicked on confirming terms and conditions, so that's all good. It's giving me an option to upgrade my room at this point, so I can flip through and take a look at the different options I have. I'm not going to upgrade my room at this point. I'm going to click on the bottom, no thanks, proceed to check-in, and I'm going to choose my arrival time. Now we'll note that it's giving me from 12 a.m. at this point, so it's giving me all the options of arrival time, and I've done this on purpose just so you can see an option that's going to come up a little bit later on. So we'll choose 12:30. I can put in some comments, and when we put in comments here, these will appear on the stay card under the reservation notes. You've selected an early check-in time. Do I want to purchase it? In this case, yeah, why not? Let's take it. So I'll take my early check-in for $60. Now these are the different add-ons, the enhancements that I can take a look at. And I'm feeling hungry, so I think I'm going to go for my full breakfast. It's 35 person for the entire stay, so we'll go ahead and add that, and that has been added very easily. I could continue to add more, but at this point I'll just continue on. Now remember, we have the CC prompt enabled, so it's asking me to enter or re-enter a credit card. There is a credit card on the stay card, but it's asking me to enter or re-enter, so I could update the payment information. In this case, I'm re-entering the same card, which is absolutely fine. And this is just a test credit card from PayPal, so don't worry about writing this down and going shopping with it. It won't work, unfortunately. Card information stored successfully, and pre-check-in complete. And that's that final piece of text that we saw at the very beginning. Thank you for checking in. If you have any questions or concerns, please call the hotel. So again, free-form text there, that could be whatever you would like. So that's the first one. Let's talk about changing some of the settings very quickly to capture address details and turning off that CC prompt. So I'm going to go back to Zest. And if we want to capture the address details, all we have to do is simply toggle on 2 options, ask guest address details and prompt for guest address. And then let's get rid of this prompt for guest CC and save the changes here. And with those 2 done, it's going to be very similar, but we're not going to see our credit card capture, and we're going to see address details appear. And the benefit of the address details appearing are that it might be mandatory for you to collect address details in your jurisdiction, but it also will show the address details that we have on file from the guest card, and it gives the guest an opportunity to update their profile. So if something's changed, it's an option for us to go ahead and modify that, or for the guest to modify that too. So here you see we have the address details, everything looks good there. I have my birth date as optional. It can be mandatory if we want it to be mandatory, and in certain jurisdictions it can be mandatory. We can also limit the date, the birth date, so you might need to be 18 or 21 to check in. So that's something that we can do too. I'm taking a 2 p.m. check-in. It's saying early check-in. I don't want to do an early check-in, so I'm going to change my arrival time. And now it's saying, okay, well, you can check in from 4 o'clock in that case. So I'm not going to pay for my early check-in. This time the chocolate dipped strawberries are looking good to me, so I'm going to choose a couple of those. Clearly, I'm very hungry today. And those have been added to the account. We'll go ahead and continue, and pre-check-in is complete. With the next one, we are going to try and avoid the guest from having to scroll through so much time frames. So we don't want them to be going through from midnight. We want to have the time appear closer to the hotel's actual operational time. And that's where this limit arrival time based on the hotel's local time comes in. So I'm going to toggle that on. I'm going to save changes there. I'm also going to turn off under promos and upsells, upsell early check-in, because I want the guest to be able to check in right away in this case. So we're turning off upsell early check-in, and we're limiting the arrival time based on the hotel's check-in time. So this should make it a little bit faster for us. Let's take a look at this one. Pre-check-in now. Once again, we're confirming our departure date and the last 4 digits. Everything looks good with our stay details. We're confirming our terms and conditions. Our address information is correct. No upgrades. So notice the current time is 2:51 p.m. When I select my time, it's saying 3 p.m. So it's making it much easier to choose a time. I'm not going to choose any enhancements this time. Pre-check-in complete. So it's a lot faster that way. So based on the different options, you can really make it as complex or as fast as is needed. So lots of different screens based on what's required, but you can make it faster or slower based on what's needed. I do also want to point out that we do have an option for ID scanning. There's an additional cost associated with this, but it is something that I wanted to point out with you. So I'm just going to quickly show this video for you. So just bear with me one moment. And this is a video of someone going through the Zest check-in on their screen, where we can actually do ID capture and ID scanning with facial recognition. And you'll see that they're scanning their driver's license. It's obviously blurred out for security reasons here. So it's front and back. And in order to validate the ID, the next step is actually for the person to take a picture. And with an external system that we're using, it validates that the ID matches the person who's actually doing the check-in. and the pre-check-in is complete and they're all set. So for those hotels who are concerned about security for those mobile check-ins where there is no staff contact, that is really a great option as well to bear in mind. Another thing that we want to talk about is the mobile key component. First thing I'll mention though is when the guest checks in, obviously we send an email to them saying that thanks for checking in, thank you for your patience, we're happy to announce that your room is ready. Again, we said please go to the express desk to pick up your key, room 515. We could change the verbiage there to say that you're going to get your key from OpenKey or from Keeper or from Zepblocks, whichever it may be. But I did include some screenshots of some of our different integrations we work with for mobile key solutions. Here is an email, for example, from OpenKey. So OpenKey can send emails and text messages. In this case, this is an email that I got from them confirming reservation details for Wexford Bay Hotel. So you can go ahead and confirm those details. This is a screenshot I took from the app on my phone, just saying that it has the reservation details there. Your key will be downloaded automatically when your room is ready, which is really nice. And I actually got the update when my room was ready, just to say that the key was available for me, even though the hotel is not real and doesn't exist. And then we have a little screenshot here from a press release from Hotel Shani. They're using Zepblocks, and this is just a really nice indicator of how that can be. So you can see the design that they have there. So this is an updated key. This guest has clearly just gotten the update. They've gone directly to the door and they can unlock the door directly using that integration. So we work with integrations. We have OpenKey, for example. We have Keeper. We have Aura Code that we use via a Control integration, and Zepblocks via an API. So lots of integrations that we work with. And basically the moment that the guest is checked in, we send that information over to them with that direct key integration, and the guest can then go ahead and unlock the door. So it's very contactless, very, very easy, seamless solutions. So with that, let's take a look at our Zest checkout settings. It's very quick and easy to set up there. We're going to go to Zest and we're going to take a look at checkout. Very similar, we have times that we want these emails to be sent out. So in this case, we have it at 1 a.m., which is rather early, but it's just a training hotel, 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. Again, if the guest engages with the first email, they will not get a second email, and we can determine times for weekdays and weekends. So that's nice. You might want it to be a little bit later on a weekend. We can also include an email address for guests for staff members to receive when there have been guests who've used this functionality, maybe only if it's not been successful for whatever reason. Also, a really nice feature, we can specifically send emails when guests have opted in for late checkouts, and that's really useful for, as you can see, housekeeping as an example, so that they get an alert when a guest has done a late checkout. Room number verification instructions. We've got some text in here. Most of our hotels don't need this, but for those hotels who have, for example, specific towers where they might need to have a leading 7 in front of the room number or some specific instruction in order for the room number to work, that's an area where you can put that in, but most of our customers just end up actually having to leave that blank. So that's perfectly fine to do. I'm going to make mention of these direct URLs in just a moment, so we'll come back to that. I do want to mention as well, on both the check-in and checkout screen, although these will be sent automatically, we do have the option to trigger these manually just by clicking into the blue link here, and you'll see a list of all the applicable guests, and you can just simply choose someone and then send it manually. If for whatever reason someone didn't get that email, you can resend it to them. So let's take a look at how that email looks. So check out now. It's going to open it up in the browser of choice. So we're going to pop in our room number. Are we ready to check out? We certainly are. We can check out now. So your balance is $81.20. I can click on the arrow and view my bill. So I can see all the charges there. That looks good to me. I can accept charges and check out. The credit card on record will be charged. And with that, thank you for staying with us. And so long as we have the invoice set up in our stationery, under hotel and staff, stationery, invoices, guest invoice, which most of us will have, just like checking out at the front desk. The guests will get a copy of their invoice emailed to them directly too. So that's a nice, easy way for guests to do an express checkout, basically using their phone. So let's lastly talk about the direct check-in URL and the direct checkout URL. So under settings and under Zest, we have this direct URL. So we can easily add new and create one. We have one here existing already. So what this allows the user to do is you can embed this URL, for example, in your website. And if I go to the URL, it lets you do the same process that we're doing via email, but using a URL instead. So something you could add to your marketing collateral, something you can embed into your website. So that's where you can have that set up here. You can also have options for include day before arrival, if you would like the guest to be able to do the pre-check-in the day before arrival, much like we have with the email too. So that's where it's set up for check-in by direct URL. For checkout, as you probably saw, those with a sharp eye, we can set that up right here. Web checkout URL, StayNTouch.com checkout. Now I recommend that you put in your property code or your property name here, Wexford Bay Hotel, the Devlin Hotel, whatever it might be, and then that will be your link that you can use to do the checkout very similarly there. Now with that, to activate this, if it's not something that you currently have active, if it's not an option that you have active for you, I recommend that you reach out to your client success manager. If you don't know who your client success manager is, go ahead and open a support ticket. They'll be able to get you in contact with them. If you have any questions about it, if you have any questions about templates, getting templates designed to match your look and feel, again, your client success manager can help you with that. With that, I'd like to go ahead and open it up for any questions that we might have.
All right, thank you, Chris. I'd now like to turn over the floor for questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. All right, so our first question is from Richard. Is there an additional cost for the template settings?
For the template settings, no, there's not an additional cost. It's part of the Zest package when you first have templates built. So if you are purchasing Zest, then the template itself will be part of Zest.
Okay. And another question from Richard. What is the difference between the email template settings and the email body fields in the pre-check-in settings?
So can you tell me that question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah. What is the difference between the email template settings and the email body fields in the pre-check-in settings?
So I think that's referring to maybe the dynamic email templates versus the check-in here. And that's really whether or not we have dynamic emails set or not. So if we're not using dynamic email templates, then it's going to be using these pre-check-in email fields here, which is going to be using basically your standard template, which is what will be built in combination with our design team. And we would get your approval on that and your kind of seal of approval. If you end up using, and that template will be there as standard, but if you decide to, and we end up going with dynamic email templates, which we can toggle on for you, that gives you extra flexibility where you can then go in and say, okay, I have my template in place, but for my emails, my Zest emails specifically, I would like to have a bit more flexibility and I would like to have my background color be, you know, a specific color, a little bit different from the rest of my template. So it just gives you more flexibility.
All right, thank you. And then from Theta, can you require a phone number as well with pre-check-in?
You cannot require a mobile number with pre-check-in currently, unfortunately. It is with just address details at the moment. Yeah,
okay.
That's a great enhancement request that we can put in.
Okay. And then from John, if a guest doesn't meet the age requirement, will it reject the check-in?
That's a great question. It will, yeah. So if we have a 21-year-old requirement for the age requirement, it will direct them to contact the hotel directly. Yeah.
Okay. And last question is from Megan. Where does the ID information get stored?
We will store the ID information for 30 days. If you want to store it, we do offer options for self-storage. So you could do, for example, Google Drive and such. We have the option for you to link to your own self-storage so that you can store it for longer if you want to, but we would store it for 30 days for you.
Okay. And then Christina, does a mobile app need to be downloaded for the key to the room?
So for certain integrations, yes. So for example, for OpenKey, it would send them a text message to download that app, and then that would then become the key app for them. Yeah, that's correct.
All right, and then from Alesha, is that a job aid on these steps?
Is that a job aid on these steps? So we do have on Freshdesk, we have lots of resources that can take you kind of step by step through much of what we've discussed. So, and if you're not familiar with Freshdesk, it's a great resource. Zest Web, how to configure Zest Web checkout, for example. They can really take you through step by step much of what we've discussed here. And most of you, if not all, should have access. And if you don't, feel free to go ahead and set yourself up an account. It's StayNTouch.freshdesk.com. And just simply search for an item like Zest Web, and it'll take you step by step on through how to configure these. And then also we're going to be sending this recording out as a banner to refer back to as well. But you can definitely refer to these articles on how to configure it as well.
Okay, thank you. And then Feda has another question. Can you require signature when selecting the terms and conditions box?
Unfortunately not, it is just a checkbox. However, when we go into the bill and charges, you will see that the guests agreed to the terms and conditions on their mobile device, and you'll see at what time and date they agreed to the terms and conditions on the mobile device.
Okay, thank you. And then Ryan asks, it gives an option for credit card check-ins, obviously. Are there any future plans for any additional options such as Apple Pay or other payment methods? And he said, thanking PCI compliance and security as well as speed.
It is a great question. So we do have the option to make the flow basically go up to the point where it stops from auto checking in. So some of our customers, for example, will do the pre-check-in, invite the guests to pre-check-in, notify them of the time that the guests will be arriving, but the system will not actually authorize the card and check the guest in, so that it will sit in, and I can kind of show an example here, I believe. It might not have automatically checked in. It'll sit in the mobile check-in queue here and not fully check in. And the benefit of that is what will happen is the guest will then come to the front desk, and then you can collect the credit card from the guest and take it in the chip and pin device. So some of our hotels are doing that. And the way that you would do that as a setup feature is just simply, let me show you real quick. Check in. Is click none, and that will prevent it from doing the auto check-in. That's good for PCI compliance because that way you're actually getting the credit card from the customer. The downside to that is obviously that's not contactless. So at the moment, that's not helping us with the contactless check-in portion. But for PCI compliance, that means that you are getting the actual credit card in the EMV device. So that's the solution for that portion. But if we want to do a completely contactless check-in, that's where the auto check-in portion is useful at the moment. For future payment integrations for Apple Pay and such, I don't have information on that at the moment, but that is something that we can definitely put in for the feature request board, and we can follow up on that for sure.
Great. And then Alesha asks again, what is the cost of the additional add-ons?
That is something that you would want to reach out to your CSM for, because it might vary. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to your CSM, and they can get you a supplemental quote for that if it's not something that you already have as part of your bundle.
Okay. And then Adam asks, can we pre-assign room numbers, or will the auto assign override during the check-in process?
So if you don't have a room number assigned, the system will just assign a room for you. If you do have a room number assigned, the system will assume that you've done that for a reason, and it will definitely keep that room assigned. So it will not unassign a room for you. It definitely won't do that.
Okay. And then The last question is, at checkout, if a guest puts the wrong number, does it still allow them to check out?
No, they do have to put the correct room number in. It is smart enough to know, for example, if your room numbers are listed as like 0204 and they put in 204, it will know that it's 0204. So it's smart enough for that, but they do have to put the correct room number in. Yeah.
Okay. And another question from Richard, can they select a room number by number or a map?
It does need to be by room number. Yeah, there's no map functionality, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. And that's all the questions I have right now. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds to enter any last questions. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. So in this webinar, we demonstrated how to configure Zest Web for check-ins and checkouts, learned how to integrate with mobile keys to allow for contactless check-in, and illustrated how to include add-ons and upsells to generate incremental revenue. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at erin.fisher@stayintouch.com. Thanks again.